like to talk about near-critical percolation and the consequence of some results we know for near-critical percolation on some real-life model, and in particular on the geometry of diffusion fronts. So, to my knowledge, the study of such diffusion fronts has been initiated in 1985 in a famous paper by Gouillet, Rousseau, and Sapoval about the roughness of diffusion fronts. Their primary goal was to show that such interfaces are fractal. And actually, they made some numerical simulations, and they measured the dimension 1.76, which is very close to the value 7/4, which is known to be universal in statistical physics. And to carry on simulations, they used an approximation. They introduced the so-called gradient percolation model, which amounts to make the following approximation: to assume that the state of the different sites, whether occupied or vacant, are independent of each other. So the idea is to introduce some inhomogeneous percolation process with parameter given by the probability of presence of a particle. Well, I will give more detail about this model later, but the idea is to introduce this inhomogeneous percolation as an approximation of diffusion fronts. So, for instance, in a strip, if particles diffuse in this direction, we get this kind of picture. If there is a source of particles at the bottom line, particles diffuse, and some concentration gradients appear, and there is an interface between a dense phase and below, and a diffuse phase above. And this interface happens to be very irregular, very rough, and this is this interface that we are going to describe. So for this model, one observes various critical exponents, describing, for instance, the amplitude of the front, its fluctuations, of the interface, its length and its roughness, and so on. And these critical exponents were conjectured, were predicted to be related to those of standard percolation. And actually, this observation can be proved using works by Lawler, Schramm, Werner, and Smirnov that provide a very precise description of percolation at criticality, and then, as I will explain, near criticality in 2 dimensions. So the idea was here to start from the idea of Sapoval and his collaborator was to start from the geometry of diffusion fronts, introduce this inhomogeneous percolation process. In some sense, our study will go backwards. We will start from critical percolation and then deduce properties of near-critical percolation, and then properties of this inhomogeneous percolation process, and use these results to describe the geometry of diffusion fronts. So this study has both theoretical importance and practical importance. This is an example where the percolation phase transition appears in real life. Actually, we will observe, as I mentioned, some critical exponents that are directly related to the critical exponents of percolation. And as we will see, the observed behavior is in some sense universal. Well, I would like to mention also that gradient percolation turned out to be a very efficient way to estimate the percolation threshold, which was used by Sapoval, Ziff, essentially. And using the results we will prove for gradient percolation, we will then return to a simple 2-dimensional model explaining the roughness of diffusion front. We'll consider the model where some very large number of particles diffuse independently on a lattice, starting from some initial point. And as I said, as the particles evolve, some concentration gradient appears, and some interfaces like this arise. And this interface can be described using properties of gradient percolation. Yeah. I would like also to mention that some more complex models exist, but I won't talk about them. They are not fully understood yet. But we can introduce, for instance, this more dynamical model where we assign some random resistances to each side of some material, some medium, and let here the corrosive, the etching liquid penetrate the material and form some limiting shape, which turns out to be also related to, which seems to be related to gradient percolation. In particular, we still observe this 7/4 roughness exponent here, numerically. So, in the first part, I will remind you, I will review what is known about standard percolation at criticality and then near criticality. So I apologize for those of you who follow the school since last week. They won't learn anything new. But I think it's important to remind this background because it is instrumental in our considerations. Then I will study the gradient percolation model itself. And finally, in the last part, I will apply the results to the geometry of diffusion fronts, explain how we can exploit the results concerning gradient percolation to describe the geometry of diffusion fronts. And to rigorously, I will also rigorously explain why the approximation that was made, assuming that the status of the different sites is completely rigorous from a mathematical point of view. So we will start from critical percolation, as I said, then near critical percolation, then inhomogeneous percolation, and finally return to some real-life model and provide a setting where these fractal dimensions spontaneously appear. So the main idea behind all these results is that what appear in models where the phase transition of percolation is intrinsically important is the near critical regime of percolation. Not necessarily the critical regime itself, but at least the near critical regime. Well, I will give more details about it. So first, standard percolation background. So in all this talk, we will restrict ourselves to the triangular lattice, which is this lattice in the plane. All our results are planar results. And side percolation on this lattice amounts to fix some parameter p between 0 and 1, and assume that each site is occupied with probability p and vacant with probability 1 minus p. And all the different sites are independent of each other. So we denote the probability measure associated to this process by p. And a configuration of side percolation on the triangular lattice is usually depicted as follows: by considering the dual hexagonal lattice, putting some hexagon around each side, so that two sides are connected on the triangular lattice if and only if the two corresponding faces are adjacent. So we get in this way some random coloring of the faces of the hexagonal lattice. And we obtain this kind of picture. And we would like to say to get some qualitative properties on the random pictures we obtain. So just a first remark before going to results. We will restrict to the triangular lattice because at present is the only lattice for which conformal invariance in the scaling limit has been established rigorously. And this conformal invariance in the scaling limits turns out to be a key step to prove the existence and the value of the critical exponents. But all the results I will present here are likely to remain true on other lattices sufficiently regular, like Z2, for instance. But we will restrict to the triangular lattice. So on this lattice, we can use oblique coordinates like this. And we will in particular use this box Sn, which is called, which is a set of points at distance n from the site, from the origin, for the distance associated to these two oblique coordinates. So in percolation, we say that two sites x and y are connected, which we denote by x arrow y, if there exists a path from x to y composed only of black sites, if there is some sequence of black sites that connect x and y, and the set of sites connected to some site x is the cluster of x that we denote by C of x. So this gives this kind of random object, which is very rough. And the main property of percolation is that it features a phase transition on the triangular lattice at p equal 1/2. The critical threshold is 1/2 on this lattice, meaning that if p is less than 1/2, there is almost surely no infinite cluster. This is the subcritical regime. And if p is larger than 1/2, there is almost surely a unique infinite cluster, and this is a supercritical regime. And if p is exactly equal to 1/2, this is what we call the critical regime, and we know for this lattice, still an open question on other lattices, that there is almost surely no infinite cluster. So actually, subcritical and supercritical regime turned out to be quite predictable in the large scale because of a property of exponential decay. For instance, in subcritical regime, for p less than 1/2, the connection probability from 0 to a point at distance n decays exponentially fast. This probability here is less than e to the minus c of p times n for some constant c of p. And so distant points get very, very decorrelated. And we get this kind of picture, a sea of white sites and some small cluster of black sites lost in it. But here the speed depends on p. This constant vanishes actually when p gets close to the critical value 1/2. So our first task will be to control this kind of upper bound when p gets close to the critical value. Well, we have the same kind of property in supercritical regime, and we observe a sea of black sites with a small cluster of white sites. But the critical regime turns out to be much more complicated. We say that there is no characteristic length. When we get further and further, when you try to scale it, we keep on observing the same behavior. For instance, it is easy to check that for symmetry reasons, the probability of crossing some n times n parallelogram is exactly equal to 1/2, because the probability of having such a black crossing is equal to the probability to have such a white crossing. And since these two events are complementary of each other, each of them has a probability 1/2. So here I use the symmetry P1 minus P at criticality. And this property implies in particular the Rousseau-Seymour-West theorem, which is a key step for studying critical percolation. It states that the probability of crossing a kn times n parallelogram in the hard direction from left to right is at least delta k for some constant delta k independent of the scale. So this probability remains bounded away from 0 uniformly in N. So this supports the idea that there is no characteristic scale when we have this uniform lower bound independently of N, stating that when we get farther and farther, then crossing probabilities remain stay non-trivial. So then to study near critical percolation, there are two main ingredients. First ingredient will be, as I said, to very well understand critical percolation. And then we will use some scaling techniques due to Harry Keston that allow to relate critical percolation to what we will call near critical percolation. And so we get in this way a rather good description of percolation near the critical points into dimensions. So let us turn now to the first ingredient, as I said, a study of critical percolation. So as we have seen since last week, a precise description of critical percolation was made possible by the introduction of SLE processes in 1999 by Oded Schramm. Then it was studied by Lawler, Schramm, and Werner. And another important step is the proof by Stas Smirnov in 2001 of conformal invariant of conformal invariance of critical percolation in the scaling limit. And this conformal invariance is really a very important step because this is the step that allows to go from the discrete setting to continuum setting. So the idea here is the following. We start from the discrete model, but this discrete model is a bit complicated to understand. So as is often the case in mathematics, we try to introduce a continuum object that will be easier to manipulate, to handle with. And this continuous object is the SLE processes. And then once we can study these SLE processes, get some properties on these processes. And then we can go back to the discrete setting. So very important events for studying critical percolation and also near critical percolation will be what we call the arm events. And these arm events refer to the existence of crossings like this from some site to the box at distance n, for instance, or more generally to crossing in some annuli. And arm events are defined as follows. We fix some number j of crossings. So here this is 4 crossing, and we fix also some sequence of colors for these crossings. So here we ask the first crossing to be black, and then the second one to be white, the third one to be black, and the fourth one to be white. And this gives rise to what we call the arm event. So here this is the arm event associated to 4 arms and alternating colors, black, white, black, white. And these arm events turn out to be very important, to be instrumental to study near critical percolation. In particular, this 4 arm event here with alternating colors. You can notice, for instance, that if you just ask for the existence of one arm, you just get the probability of connection from the origin to point at distance n. So this is related to what we call the function theta of p of percolation, giving the probability of existence of a crossing from 0 to infinity. So at criticality, these arm events have probabilities that decay like power laws. Power laws described by what we call the J-arm exponents. We have the following theorem that was proved by combining results of Lawler, Schramm, Werner, and Smirnov. For j equal 1, the probability of existence of connection from 0 to distance n decays like n to the minus 5 over 48. well, this exponent may seem a bit complicated. Actually, it comes from SLE computations, but I don't think there is any direct way to see where it comes from. And for any j larger than 2, if we fix any sequence of colors for the j arms such that there is at least one black arm and one white arm, this is what I wrote here, any non-constant sequence, then the probability of existence of j arms decays like n to the minus alpha j, where alpha j is the exponent here, j squared minus 1 divided by 12. So for instance, for j equal 4, so this was the previous event, we get 16 minus 1 divided by 12, so this gives 5 over 4, for instance. So, well, let me make some comments about this theorem. First of all, this symbol here is what we call a logarithmic equivalent. We expect these two quantities here to remain of the same order of magnitude, meaning that their ratio remains bounded away from 0 and infinity. But the way these results are proved only provide this logarithmic equivalence, which means that the logarithm of the logarithms of both sides are equivalent. Their ratio tends to 1 as n tends to infinity, meaning that log of this probability divided by log of n tends to minus 5 over 48 as n goes to infinity. So here, as I said, we can fix, for j larger than 2, we can fix any non-constant sequence of colors from the j arms. Actually, there is some nice combinatorial trick called switching argument that proves that if we take two sequences of colors where both colors are present, white and black, then the corresponding probability are of the same order of magnitude. But this result turns out to be false for constant sequences, meaning that if I take some sequence with both colors and a sequence with only black crossings, for instance, the corresponding probabilities are not of the same order of magnitude. The corresponding exponents are even not the same. So to describe, as I said, the discrete process, it is a natural way is to understand the scaling limit. And for that, we can define a radial process, radial exploration process dynamically. So now I just would like to sketch how these arm exponents are obtained, but I will not give at all the details. So the idea is the following. We take some annulus like this, and the triangular lattice with mesh size delta on it. And we would like to understand what happens when the mesh size delta goes to 0. And for that, we introduce what we call a radial exploration process. We start an exploration process like this. And each time it reaches the boundary, it bounces. And in this way, we can translate arm event in terms of this exploration process like this. For instance, the existence of two arms from the boundary to the inner boundary is related to the fact that the process does not close any counterclockwise loop or clockwise loop before reaching the inner boundary. And this exploration process turns out to have a natural equivalent in the continuous setting, which is what we call a radial SLE6. So we get in this way a connection between arm events and some events for radial SLE6. But I won't enter into details now. So a second ingredient to understand near critical percolation is what we call a characteristic length. the idea is to measure how quickly we get sub or subcritical. And for that, the key idea is to introduce this length L epsilon of P that will measure the scale on which crossing probabilities of n times n parallelograms remain bounded away from 0 and 1, remain non-trivial. So we fix some epsilon between 0 and 1/2, and we look at these probabilities of crossing n times n box. We know that at criticality, this probability is exactly 1/2. And in subcritical regime, for instance, when p is less than 1/2, this probability here tends to zero exponentially fast due to the exponential decay property. And so we can introduce this length up to which this crossing probability here remains at least epsilon. And a similar definition holds in supercritical regime, but this time we look at the scale on which it remains less than 1 minus epsilon. So, well, here the existence of black crossing is equivalent to, is related to the existence of white crossing. So here I just use the symmetry P1 minus P. You can check that with this definition, for instance, L of P is equal to L of 1 minus P. And this characteristic length will really be the right scale to consider to describe near critical percolation. For instance, the Rousseau-Semmelweis theorem that I mentioned before remains true for parallelograms of size less than L of P, for on scales below L of P. And the probability to observe arms also remain of the same order of magnitude. For instance, the probability to observe a connection from 0 to distance n is of the same order of magnitude at P and at 1/2. So for gradient percolation, we will need that the probability at P to observe J arms is of the same order of magnitude as the probability at criticality exactly. So we can relate in this way arm events at P to arm events at criticality that we can describe using a conformal invariance, the scaling limit, and so on. Yes? From 0 and from some neighborhood of 0. If J is too large so that all the arms can arrive on some single point, you have to take some enhanced neighborhood of 0. Well, here I say the Sj. For instance, if J is equal to 30, then all the arms have not enough space to arrive on the origin. So you have to take, I don't know, J equal 1 or J equal 2, 3. But this is just a combinatorial objection, but this does not change at all the order of magnitude of the events. You just change the probability by some constant. So here, as I said, we can control, we can compare arm events at P and arm events at 1/2 uniformly in P on scale less than L of P. And this lemma used extensively actually, I won't talk about the proof, but the proof uses extensively the Rousseau-Semmelweis upper and lower bounds to say that we have this same order of magnitude here. So the previous results showed that on scale less than L of P, things could still be compared to critical percolation. But this scale also is the scale on which we start to get sub or subcritical. For instance, in subcritical regime, we can prove that the existence of crossing a n times n box decays exponentially fast with respect to n divided by L of P. So we have this upper bound C1 times e to the minus C2n divided by L of P. And here the constant C1 and C2 do not depend on P anymore. So we get in this way a uniform control of speed when P gets close to 1/2. And this lemma implies in particular that the probability, so now if we are in supercritical regime, the probability that 0 is connected to infinity, so this is what we call the theta function for percolation. So, well, this can also be seen as the density of the infinite cluster in supercritical regime. This probability here is comparable to the probability to reach the box of size L of P, meaning that once we have reached the distance L of P, we are already not very far from infinity. Conditionally on the fact that we have reached distance L of P, there is a positive probability to reach infinity. So to summarize, this length L of P is at the same time, as I said, a scale on which we can still compare things to critical percolation. The pictures stays approximately the same, and also a scale at which connectivity properties start to really change. And so this turns out to be the right way to see, to study the right scale to introduce to describe the model near criticality. I would like to mention that we can also prove that L epsilon of P is comparable to epsilon prime of P for, shall I continue? Yeah? So I would like also to mention that we can prove that L of P, actually the parameter epsilon here is not very relevant, meaning that if we take 2 epsilon and epsilon prime between 0 and 1/2, then the corresponding characteristic length remain of the same order of magnitude. So there is, up to multiplicative constants, there is essentially one way, only one way to one right characteristic length to introduce. And all these ingredients allow them to get a good description of standard percolation near criticality. We can get in this way the critical exponents associated to the main characteristic functions that are usually denoted by physicists psi, chi, phi. For instance, by quoting what we call pivotal sites. So pivotal sites are sites that will change, that will be crucial for the existence of a left-right crossing. And they are related to the four-arm events. And we can prove the following relation. And in particular, we get that the characteristic length behaves like p minus 1/2 to the minus nu as p goes to 1/2 with nu equal to 4/3. Actually, this 4/3 exponent will be the only one, I think, that we will use for gradient percolation. And we can also get in this way that the density theta of P of the infinite cluster behaves like P minus 1/2 to the 5/36 as P goes to 1/2. So this comes from this relation here, because we know that theta of P is of the same order of magnitude as the probability to reach distance L of P. And this probability here is comparable to the same probability at 1/2. So this probability decays like L of P to the minus 5/48, this 5/48 exponent. And so we get that theta of P decays like L of P to the minus 5/48. And this gives this 5/36 exponent. So after having talked about this near critical percolation study, I would like to explain how we can use these results to describe gradient percolation. So gradient percolation is defined as follows. So here I will stick to the simplest setting, but actually the results would remain true in more complicated settings. So here I will consider gradient percolation in a strip of finite width and of finite length that I denote by Ln. And I assume the percolation parameter to decrease linearly in y. So I take the percolation parameter to be equal to 1 on the bottom of the strip and to be equal to 0 on the top, and to decrease linearly between 1 and 0 as the y coordinate increases. So we obtain in this way this kind of picture. At the bottom, the parameter is very close to 1. So we will observe a big cluster of black sites like this. And all the black sites, more or less, are connected to the bottom of the strip. On the contrary, on the top of the strip, we observe a big cluster of white sites. Almost all the white sites are connected to the top of the strip. And the important property of this gradient percolation model is the appearance of some random interface between these two clusters. A random interface that touches like this at the same time the cluster of black sites connected to the bottom and the cluster of white sites connected to the top. So, as I said, two different regions appear, a big cluster of occupied sites at the bottom and a big cluster of vacant sites at the top, separated by some random interface that touches at the same time these two clusters. So in the following, I will assume that we have this hypothesis on the length ln. So this first upper bound is not very relevant, but it will make life easier. That ln does not increase exponentially fast. And I also assume that ln is at least n to the 4/7 plus epsilon for some positive epsilon. And, well, I will explain where this 4/7 exponent comes from, but this hypothesis is very important for our study. But you can just notice that if you take ln equal to n, so just a square, then these two hypotheses are satisfied. So heuristically, what we have is that the critical behavior of this model will remain localized in some what we call a critical strip around p equal 1/2. And in this strip, we will be able to compare percolation as almost critical. So here, on this picture, here I have some supercritical region where p is close to 1. Here I have some subcritical region where p is close to 0. And here I have some critical strip where I will be allowed to say that percolation is more or less critical, at least near critical. And the width of this strip, this critical strip, can be estimated in the following way. So when we are at on the line where p equal 1/2 exactly, then there is no characteristic length, it is infinite. And when we get away from this critical line, so we start from the critical line in the middle, and when we get away, for instance going above, then the characteristic length corresponding to the parameter we measure here will decrease. So the characteristic length is infinite in the. So I look at the characteristic length associated to the percolation parameter observed, and this characteristic length decreases when we get away from the critical line, and it gets say 0 when we are at the bottom, at the top. And so at some distance, when there is some distance, sigma, that I denote by sigma n from the critical strip, when the associated characteristic length is of the same order as the distance sigma n. So this gives this equation here. Sigma n equal L of the parameter associated to sigma n. So sigma n equal L of 1/2 plus sigma divided by 2n. And you can notice that the exponent 4/3 for L of P directly implied that sigma n behaves like n to the 4/7. So this is where this 4/7 exponent comes from. And we'll see that this sigma n turns out to be the characteristic scale of the gradient percolation model. For instance, the vertical fluctuation of the front. So this fluctuation here around so the critical line is around here, and the vertical fluctuation below and above are exactly of order sigma n. And we'll see also that there is some property of decorrelation, of horizontal decorrelation, meaning if I take 2 points here and here at distance much larger than sigma n, then the probability for this point here and the probability for this point here to be on the front, these two events are almost independent, meaning that the corresponding probability decay to 0 exponentially fast. So first of all, a first important step is to prove that we indeed have a unique front, a unique interface, because this is not obvious. For instance, you can convince yourself that when you take, as I said, a finite length and finite width strips, there is still a positive probability to observe, say, a black crossing and a white crossing below it and a black crossing below it. So there is still a positive probability to observe two interfaces. But actually, this probability turns out to decay exponentially fast, or at least sub-exponentially fast, to 0 as n tends to infinity. So what I mean is that there is a unique interface with very, very high probability. So this will be our first result. And this property will imply that points at horizontal distance much larger than sigma n are completely decorrelated. The probability, as I said, that two of them are on the front, the symmetric difference between the two events tends to 0 sub-exponentially fast in probability. And the fluctuations of the front are of the same order as sigma n. So first of all, we have the following lemma. With probability very close to 1, there is a unique front that we will denote by Fn. So formally, we have the following lower bound. The probability is that the boundaries of the two big clusters coincide, not just touches, but coincide. This probability is at least 1 minus e to the minus n to the delta prime for n large enough. So this probability tends to 1 sub-exponentially fast. And here the exponent delta prime depends on epsilon on this epsilon here. And in consequence, so to prove this property, actually we divide the strip into substrips. And to check that the interface is unique, it is enough to, well, for the interface to be unique, it is enough that it is unique in some substrip. Once we know that it is unique in some substrip, you can convince yourself that it has to be unique in the whole strip. And in each substrip, we show that there is some positive probability for the interface to be unique. So the probability that it is unique in one of the substrips will give you this kind of lower bounds. And the consequence of this construction is that being on the front is a very local property. It depends only on the neighborhood of the site X of size sigma n. I can see if a site is on the front just by looking on sites at distance sigma n around X. So this proves that points at horizontal distance much larger than sigma n just are completely decorrelated. So when n gets very large, we obtain this kind of picture. And as I said, the vertical fluctuations of the front that we know to be unique will turn out to be exactly of order sigma n, which is of order n to the 4/7. So this means that if you consider, for instance, Gaussian percolation in a square, you will get this random interface which is unique with very high probability. If you scaled it directly by n, you would just get a straight line in the limit. So you have to take some, if you want to see some non-trivial geometry in the scaling limit, you have to scale by n to the 4/7 instead. If you had just scaled directly by n, then the roughness of the interface would just disappear in the scaling limit. So this scale sigma n turns out to be the right order of magnitude of the vertical fluctuations. We have the following theorem. The probability for the front to stay in any strip of width n to the 4/7 minus delta around the critical line tends to 0 sub-exponentially fast. So, and on the contrary, the probability that this interface exits any strip of width n to the 4/7 plus delta, this probability also decays to 0 exponentially fast. So this theorem means that I have to stay in any strip of width n to the 4/7 plus delta, and I can stay in a strip of width n to the 4/7 minus delta. So this n to the 4/7 is the right way, is the right order of magnitude for the fluctuations of the interface. So let me just explain how we can derive the second, the upper bound. So that the front cannot exit a strip of width n to the 4/7 plus delta. It comes from the following observation. If it exited such a strip, then it would create some crossing here, some black crossing here in the subcritical region. Here I have the subcritical region. And we know that the probability of existence of such a crossing can be controlled uniformly in the sides of these parallelograms here, divided by the characteristic length. And we can check that the characteristic length here is less than n to the 4/7. So actually the probability of existence of such a black crossing here just decays to 0 exponentially fast. So I can't have such a black crossing here in the subcritical region. So this last result implies that to estimate a quantity related to the front, like its length, for instance, you just have to consider the edges in the critical strip of width sigma n, n to the 4/7. And for its edges, being on the front is equivalent to having two arms of length sigma n going to distance sigma n. So the probability for any edge, any site in the critical strip to be on the front behaves like sigma n to the minus 1/4. 1/4 is the two-arm exponent. You can get it just by putting j equal 2 in the formula I wrote before. And so we get that the probability for any edge to be on the front decays like n to the minus 4, n to the minus 1/7, using that sigma n decays like n to the 4/7. And so now if we sum over all sites in the critical strip, we get that in expectations, the length of the front behaves like n to the 3/7 times ln. So we get some another critical exponent 3 over 7 that is also related to the exponents of standard percolation. So the previous one, 4 over 7, was nu divided by 1 minus nu, so this comes from the critical length exponent. Here this exponent comes from the critical length exponent also, and also the two-arm exponent, giving the probability of having one black arm going to the bottom and one white arm going to the top. So for ln equal to n, you can notice that, for instance, the length of the front behaves like n to the 10 over 7. And a noteworthy property is that if you take a box of characteristic size sigma n, then you will observe approximately n points on the front. So this property was what actually physicists first observed concerning gradient percolation. But well, I didn't see any. Well, this just comes from computation, but I don't see any direct way to see it, any intrinsic way. And you can also study how the length Tn of the front concentrates around the expectation. Once you have the decorrelation of points at horizontal distance much larger than sigma n, you have some law of large numbers. And you get, for instance, that Tn divided by its expectation tends to 1 in L2 as n tends to infinity. So Tn will get concentrated around its expectation, which I remind you behaves like n to the 3 over 7 times ln. So you can introduce also well, what we did for the length of the front. You can do it also for other macroscopic quantities related to gradient percolation. We can, for instance, consider the boundaries of the front. So on this picture, what we call usually the boundary for percolation is, so here the upper boundary will be the boundary where we do not enter what we call the fjords here, the sides that are connected by only one path to the top of the strip. So here the upper boundary will make something like that. It won't enter this fjord, for instance. It won't enter this fjord here, so it will just stay outside here, something like that. So, for instance, I won't enter this canal here and this canal here. And we can describe these quantities, the length of the lower and upper boundaries in the same way. So the fact of being on the front was equivalent to have a black arm here going to the bottom and a white arm going to the top. For the upper boundary here, for a site to be on the upper boundary is like having one white arm going to the top, and another disjoint white arm going also to the top, and one black arm going to the bottom. So here the upper boundary, for instance, will be described by the free arm exponent now. So the upper boundary will be described by the free arm exponent, so two white arms and one black arm. And the lower boundary will be also described as a free arm exponent, but this time two black arms and one white arm. So if you plug the value j equal to 3 in the formula I wrote before, you get the value 2/3 for the free arm exponent. And if you make the computation, you get that the length of the boundary decay like n to the 4 over 21 times ln. So this gives rise to a third critical exponent, and this one comes from the free-arm exponent and also the exponent nu for the characteristic length. So now I would like to mention that gradient percolation is also an efficient way to estimate percolation thresholds on lattices for which we do not know any closed formula. So here, for instance, here of course, for the triangular lattice, we know the percolation threshold to be exactly equal to 1/2. So this does not make any sense. But for lattices like Z2, for instance, we do not know any closed value. And gradient percolation actually was, historically speaking, the way we got for the first time very precise values for the percolation threshold. Bob Ziff got in this way values up to the 5th or 6th decimal. So the idea is to consider the mean height of the front. So you just look at the different edges that are on the front and average their heights. And then we normalize it, so we get some random quantity between 0 and 1/2, between 0 and 1, so that I denote by y the tilde of n. So for the triangular lattice, we have a strong symmetry between white and black sides. So here, the expectation is just equal to 1/2. But you can also notice that the horizontal decorrelation property implies that you have this upper bound on the variance, so that if ln is large enough, say for instance ln equal n squared, then the normalized mean height here will be very close to its expectation, and so it will be very close to the threshold here 1/2. Well, but the triangular lattice, as I said, is not interesting. So what happens on other lattices like Z2? Mathematically speaking, we can still prove that L of P is bounded by some power of P minus PC. So we can still prove that the front converges toward PC. But since the results presented here comes from the exponents of standard percolation, if you use the common belief of statistical physics that these exponents are universal, then you can expect all the results actually to remain true on other lattices like Z2. So once we know that the critical exponents exist and we know their values, then all the results remain true. But let me mention a question that is still open. So we know that by decorrelation, this mean height should be very close to its expectation, but it's not completely clear that its expectation is exactly equal to PC. We know from localization that it has to be between PC minus n to the 3/7 and PC plus n to the minus 3/7. But you can opt for a much better bond in 1/n, for instance, but this is not clear. And actually, we've made some simulation, and we do not get this 3/7 exponent, but we do not get -1 either. We get some intermediate exponent that maybe is universal, maybe not, I don't know. So let me summarize the situation now. So I have this gradient percolation model. So we said that the interface is unique with high probability, that it can't enter the supercritical region because otherwise it would create this kind of white crossings here. It can't also enter the subcritical region because it would create this kind of black crossings here. So it has to stay in some critical strip of width approximately sigma n around the critical line. So now a natural question is, can we relate the behavior of this interface to SLE6? Is its law, for instance, absolutely continuous to the law of an SLE6 that we know to to describe the scaling limit of critical percolation. So, for instance, we have used that since we stay near criticality, the critical exponents remain the same. So, for instance, the Hausdorff dimension here will be a 7/4 like for SLE6. And, the probability of crossing will be of same order of magnitude and so on. And, well, natural question is this random curve here related to, in some sense, to SLE6? So for that, we have to understand what happens when the interface bounces like that, when it gets at distance, at characteristic distance from the critical line, so above and below. So using some standard arguments that we have seen last week due to Eisenman and Burchard, we can prove the existence of scaling limits. Actually, the right way to scale the interface is to use this characteristic length, sigma n of epsilon, which is, as I said before, the scale on which the characteristic length is comparable to the distance. If we were to introduce this characteristic length in this intrinsic way, you can check that the characteristic length associated to two values epsilon and epsilon prime are comparable, and scaling by a quantity much smaller or much larger than this quantity sigma and epsilon would not produce any non-trivial limits. And here it's important to use this intrinsic definition because otherwise we would have to take care of the... Here we only know the behavior of L up to some logarithmic corrections, meaning that we had this logarithmic equivalence that L of P is like P minus 1/2 to the minus 4/3, but there could be some logarithmic corrections. But if we use this intrinsic definition, we can prove the existence of scaling limits. And we would like to relate these potential scaling limits to SLE6. But we have you can note that we observe some asymmetry, meaning that, for instance, when the front will be at characteristic distance here from the critical line, there will be some small excess of white sides compared to black sides, and the front will have a tendency to turn more to the right than to the left, for instance, and so it would create some. We will observe some local asymmetry, and in the same way here, it will have a tendency to turn more to the left than to the right. So formally speaking, you can note that if you consider a box of size, say, sigma n around the line -2 sigma n, it will contain approximately n sides, as we saw before. But the difference between the number of black sides and the number of white sides will be of order n to the 4/7. It's a small computation. You compute the probability to be black and on the front minus the probability to be white and on the front. Actually, being on the front is independent of the state of the site, just since it can be expressed in terms of existence of two arms. You get that this difference is over the n to the 4/7, which turned out to be much larger than square root of n, the standard deviation. And we can prove that in the scaling limits, this discrete asymmetry remains visible. We get some continuous asymmetry. And we can prove that the law of the front is singular with respect to SLE6. So this is related to some regime of percolation that we call the off-critical percolation. And Wendelin will give more details about it. So I won't talk more about it. But the important idea here is in this model, in this natural model where the phase transition of percolation appears spontaneously, this is not the critical regime that we will observe, but rather the near critical regime for percolation. So now in the last part, I would like to explain how we can exploit these results to describe the geometry of diffusion fronts. And we will get in this way, we'll introduce a model, a natural model, where fractal geometry spontaneously appears actually. So the model is the following. We start at time t equals 0 with a large number of particles located at some sites, and we let them perform independent random walks. And then at each time t, we look at the sites containing at least one particle. So we say that a site is occupied if it contains at least one particle, and we say it to be vacant otherwise. So now if we look at the occupied sites, they can be regrouped into clusters, and we get this kind of pictures. So here I started with some very large number of particles at the origin. I let them perform independent random walks. And actually so I color in gray the sites that contain at least one particle. And some concentration gradients appear, and I observe some random interface, macroscopic random interface surrounding the origin. So when the time t increases, we observe different regimes. At first, as we will see, a very dense cluster around the origin forms. And yes? Yes.
But it doesn't need to be connected to the origin.
Well, it turns out to be the case, actually. Well, to be more precise, you take some. You can prove that if you take some neighborhood of size, say. Well, I will give more details later, but with very high probability, this is the case actually that. There is only one contour and that it is connected to the origin, or at least to some very small neighborhood of the origin, because there is still a positive probability that the origin is white, for instance. So as the time t increases, we observe different regimes. So there is first a regime when t is very small compared to n. In this case, we observe a very dense cluster around the origin. So if we make some picture, here I took n equal 10,000 particles, and I let the time t increases. So for t equal 10, for instance, I get this very dense cluster around the origin that grows like this. And interesting things happen actually when t gets comparable to n. What happens is that the cluster first continues to grow up to some time t max that is proportional to n, that is lambda max times n. And then it starts to decrease and finally dislocates at some other time tc that I will call the critical time, and that is also proportional to n. And after this critical time, the cluster never reappears. So you can write down explicit formulas for lambda max and lambda c. The byproduct of this study is that the ratio between Tc and Tmax is universal, and it turns out to be equal to E exactly. So let me show what happens. So first there is a very dense cluster around the origin. So this is T equal 10, T equals 100, T equal 500, T equal 1000, and now T is more or less comparable to N. So the cluster grows, and it reaches some maximal radius here for some time Tmax. and then it starts to decrease. So, well, it's not very obvious on the picture, but here the radius of the picture increases, but the radius of the cluster starts to decrease, meaning that the white sites start to penetrate inside the black cluster. And at some critical time TC, the white sites reach the origin. Well, you should look on the picture. You should zoom on the picture to see it. But here I have a white connection from infinity to the origin, and then it just gets dilute like this. We only observe very small clusters of black sites lost in a sea of white sites. So now I would like to explain why our gradient percolation approximations is valid. Actually, there are three main ingredients to show that. The first ingredient is what we call a local central limit theorem. For our purpose, we will need this strong form. That's the probability of presence of a random walk at site z after t steps is like this quantity with a big O of 1 over t squared. So this is quite standard in probability. And here this constant square root of 3 divided by 2 just comes from the density of sites on the triangular lattice. How many sites I have is I take, for instance, a box of size n times n, a square of size n times n. So now the probability of occupation for a site z will be 1 minus pt of z to the n. And this can be approximated by 1 minus e to the minus n times pt of z. And the interface will stay localized where this occupation probability is close to the percolation threshold 1/2. And if you make some small calculation, you get that this is equal to 1/2 exactly for r equal r star, which is given by this formula. But this is equal to 1/2 only if t is less than tc. And if t is larger than tc, then this occupation parameter stays less than 1/2 on the whole plane. And you can get also the exact value of lambda c, which is given by this formula. And as I said, the approximation using gradient percolation is valid. And why is it valid? Because actually to describe the boundary of the cluster, I only have to look at some negligible fraction of the site. So here the radius at which the parameter is close to 1/2 behaves like square root of t. And I will observe some fluctuation of, so here I have a gradient in 1 divided by square root of t. And so I will observe fluctuations of order square root of t to the 4/7, the previous 4/7 exponent. So I get fluctuations of order t to the 2/7. So this is what I expect. And actually, this annulus of width t to the 2/7 around the circle of radius square root of t, the sites in this annulus will be enough to describe the boundary of the cluster. Well, actually, you have to put some small canal also connected this annulus to the origin of width t to the 2/7 also. But anyway, all these sites represent a negligible fraction of the sites, so we can use a Poissonian approximation and say that what we observe in this annulus is comparable to the Poissonian case. we get, for instance, the following result. If you take time equal to lambda n for some lambda less than lambda c, then with probability tending to 1 as n tends to infinity, there will exist a unique macroscopic interface surrounding 0. It's more or less, it's more surrounding t to the epsilon if you want uniqueness. So this is what I mean by macroscopic. This interface will remain localized in the annulus of width t to the 2/7 around the circle of radius square root of t. So this comes from the 4/7 exponent of gradient percolation. And we can also describe its length. It behaves like t to the 5/7. So this is related to the previous 10/7 exponent. And its roughness can be described via the universal exponent 7/4, meaning that, well, you can't construct some continuous object, but it's say it's a local Hausdorff dimension, it's a box dimension locally. The number of boxes it will cross behaves like is given by the exponent 7/4. So we constructed in this way a natural model where the fractal geometry spontaneously appears. I would just like to mention that similar results are valid in the case where t is much less than n to the alpha. When t is much less than n, when it is, for instance, for the n to the alpha for some alpha less than 1. So the picture will be a bit different. When t is of order n, then the parameter decreases linearly when we get away from the origin. So here it is some parameter p less than 1/2, and it decreases gradually. While for t less than 1, for t less than n, the transition is more abrupt. So here I have a very dense cluster on the origin, and the transition is localized. But actually, similar results hold, and only the side of what I would call the transition window is different. Here I get a window of size square root of t divided by square root of log t around the circle of radius square root of t times log t. But you can notice that this extra log t term will not change the critical exponent to 2/7 and 1/2. So to be, for the sake of completeness, let us just mention what happens when I take times larger than Tc. Well, in this case is actually easier because you can dominate the whole picture by a subcritical percolation. And you get, for instance, that the probability that every cluster is of size less than C log n tends to 1 if you have chosen the constant C appropriately. So we only get a dilute phase of very small clusters. So to conclude, I'd like to mention another model where now you consider a Poissonian source at some given site. So the model is the following. You assume that particles arrive at rate mu positive at the origin. And once arrived, they just perform independent random walks. So actually, these models can be described exactly in the same way. So here I drew the evolution of the model for rate 50, u equal 50. And what we observe is a dense cluster around the origin that was like this. So a natural question is, does this behavior depend on the value of mu? Is there a phase transition? But unfortunately not. So the occupation parameter now is given by this formula, where rho t of z is just the sum pi 0 of z plus and so on plus pi t of z, which can be approximated by this integral. And you can prove that the behavior is the same as previously for any value of mu positive, meaning that there is no phase transition. What I mean by the same is the same as the case t less than tc. And so you observe a unique macroscopic interface surrounding 0 that will remain localized in an annulus of width t to the 2 over 7 around the circle of radius square root of t. And its length will behave like t to the 5 over 7, and this interface will be rough and locally described by the observed dimension 7/4. So the fact that there is no phase transition comes from the fact that random walks are recurrent in 2 dimensions. And if you want to observe a phase transition, you should consider actually some rate that decreases to 0 as time t increases. So well, this is the conclusion. Thank you. Yes? Linearly, yes.